Hello everyone, and today I'm going to be talking about the cry out method and sleep training. And this is a video that I didn't plan, and I felt it needed to be made today and not tomorrow. It's really late in my home right now, and I should be putting my kids to bed, so you may be hearing them in the background. But I felt this video needed to be made today and not tomorrow. Um, and I think it's such an important topic that has the ability to shape the future in so many ways. This video is not meant to shame anyone or to make anyone feel bad about the way they're doing things. It's meant to bring awareness to a much needed topic. So let's get started right from the start. The first thing that I want to tell you is that motherhood requires sacrifice, period. Motherhood requires sacrifice. It requires us to go through a period of discomfort, of sleepless nights, of tiredness. That's just the way that motherhood is, that parenting is. There are seasons, and there are no shortcuts. There will be these hard seasons. And we will need to inconvenience ourselves to raise these little humans. The problem comes when we as parents, we want to place a child in a crib far away from us. We want to place a child in their own room with a camera so that this little baby does not interfere with our sleep, does not interfere with our schedule, does not interfere with our jobs, does not interfere with our lives. And that is where the problem comes in. We are getting away from our main role. And I understand that people have to go to work. I understand that. But when you choose to have a child, you are the one that needs to raise that child, that needs to comfort that child, that needs to provide for that child. And no one can do it for you. Not daycare, not a nanny, not a grandmother. No one can do it to perfection like you can. It is your role to have that season of sacrifice. There are no shortcuts. And it's truly sad that we as a society have gotten so far away from our own humanity that we need a book to tell us how to raise our kids. We need an expert. We need a pediatrician. We need someone else who has more expertise to tell us how to raise our kids. That's crazy. That's nature. If you look at nature and you look at animals in the wild, how do they take care of their babies? They have them under their wings. They have them in their nest. They have them in their dens. They have them in their caves. They don't have them in the cave next door. They don't have them in the tree next to them in another nest. They have them right there with them. So how is it that animals doing it better than us? How is it that we are much more intelligent than these animals, but we can't figure it out? We can make these skyscrapers, we can do all these technological advancements, but we can't raise a little baby. This is something that we all need to think about. It's really simple. Now, the second thing that I want to address is that babies do not need to be sleep trained. They don't. They naturally follow the sleep cycle of their parents. Whatever their parents' schedule is, they go right along with it as time passes. I'll tell you that me as a mom of 5, I've co-slept with all of my children. They've either been on my bed, they've been on a co-sleeper right next to me, right stuck to my bed. I have a video of our co-sleeper. I'll link it below in the description box. I've also had other times where I've set up a little pack and play right next to my bed, and I put the baby right there next to me on the high level. I put the pack and play on the high level, and the baby's right there next to me, and I could just arms reach away. And I've never had a problem with my kids sleeping at night. I mean, there will be a season of sacrifice, right? So in the beginning, I would wake up every hour or so, right? Every 1 to 2 hours when you have a little newborn. And then when they're like 2 to 4 months, they wake up like every 2 to 3 hours. It's just part of it. And what I did was I breastfed all of my kids. So I would breastfeed them and then they would go right back to sleep. No fuzz. By 6 months, they were probably waking up like once a night or twice a night, the most. And by 1 year old, they were sleeping through the night without waking up at all. And so it was no bother to me at all. It was just nature for me. I didn't try to rush independence. I didn't try to put the child in a crib far away. I didn't try to put the child in another room with a camera. I didn't try to rush independence because I know, and I knew back then, that there will come a day where they will be in their own rooms. And almost all of my children are except my baby right now. I was 6 months old. And I knew also that one day they would be out of my home, and that childhood is so fast that it goes. Babies grow up so fast. Before you know it, they'll be crawling and they won't want to be in your lap anymore. It goes by really, really quick. So just take the time of just caring for those babies because it will go by so fast. So let's talk a little bit about the cry out method. So there's two ways that people do it. There's the cry out method where you just let the child cry it out in their room and you just leave them and you never go in the room, in their own room, and just leave them there to cry it out. And you come back the next morning. The whole point is to have the child self-soothe. Another more modified way is that you go in every like 15, 20, 30 minutes. You go in and check up on them, but they're still crying it out. So this whole philosophy, one of the pioneers was Dr. Holt in the 1800s. And he published a book called The Care and the Feeding of Children. And of course, it was an instant bestseller because people need to be told how to do these things, right? They need to be told because it's not nature for them. And so Dr. Holt basically talked about that if you give a child too much love and too much nurturing, and you cry and you carry them when they cry right away, and you tend to them when they cry right away, you can actually spoil them and do them a disservice. And he talks about in his book that the way that you're supposed to do it is that you're supposed to let the baby cry it out for 1, 2, 3 hours at first when you're trying it out. And then the second time, they're going to cry less. They're going to cry like 15 to 20 minutes. And then the next time, it's going to be less and less and less. And then they're just not going to cry anymore. Now, you want to ask yourself, why is it that the baby's not crying anymore? Is it because they're being sleep trained and they really get it? Like they just get it now as babies that they need to sleep. Or is it because they've understood, they've learned that their cry is pointless now? Is it because maybe they feel abandoned and they know that no one's really going to come for their help anymore? I want to talk about this for a little bit because crying is the only tool a child has for communication. It's the only way that they can let their parent know when they have a need. And they feel really powerful when they can cry and they're tended to because they feel that the communication is happening here. They're crying and the parent is coming to their rescue and coming to feed them, coming to take care of them. When you ignore that cry, you're letting the child know, I don't hear you. I'm not going to come to you. Your communication, the most powerful tool that you have, is not working. What message are you sending that child? The message of abandonment? It's a powerful message. The message of, I don't hear you. It's really sad. It's a really sad message to send to babies. To deprive little babies of love and affection, like this Dr. Holt says. It's crazy. It's crazy. And he says that, like, if you hug and you kiss your children too much, then they're going to become the children that are clingy, that are needy, failed individuals, right? But I'm going to argue that is the opposite way around. That the children that are clingy and that are needy are the children that you let them cry it out, that you don't tend their needs. My children have never been clingy and needy. I can leave them with anyone. They'll be fine. I can leave them in places and they'll be fine. And I think it's because I filled their cup up since they were babies, and they've been right there next to me, and I've tended to their crying. I've tended to their needs right away. They know that I'm there for them. They've grown up to be confident. Stress is a really bad thing. And when babies cry, there's stress in that baby. Stress rises cortisol levels. And what does cortisol do? Cortisol damages brain cells. It interferes with learning. It interferes with memory. It interferes with many things. But overall, you guys, it's going to break the bond between you and your child. And that's something you never want to do. And I talk about that in my channel over and over again. You never want to break the bond between you and your child. This is a basic human need, to have that bond and connection with another caregiver, another human being. You never want to break that bond. It's very important not to break it. So let's talk about an article that I was reading. So Professor Helen Ball, she's a PhD, and she's a professor of anthropology in Durham University. And so she studies anthropology, right? She's a professor of it. She studied anthropology. And let's talk a little bit about her findings. So she says in her research that crying is the infant's only means of attracting their mother in order to ensure their own survival. Let me repeat that again. So when children cry out, that's their way, their instinctual way of ensuring their own survival. And so also for parents, why is it that parents just can't stand a baby crying? Because it's not nature to be able to do something like that. It is our nature to tend to that crying baby, to go and pick them up and tend to them. To resist the urge to get that baby is detrimental, psychological, and stressful for the mothers and fathers. So she says leaving an infant to cry is evolutionarily inappropriate and detrimental to both mother and baby. And she goes on to say that when the infant cannot rely on the mother's care for survival, when the baby is crying out, they understand that they can no longer rely on the mother's care for survival. So the baby goes into this survival mode and it starts conserving energy. Since the mother, as a food source, is now unpredictable. So that is what's going on in the mind of a child when you let them cry it out. They're in survival mode. They're in trauma mode. They're shutting down. They're conserving energy. So when you think that you're sleep training them, and they're not crying anymore, it's not because they're learning and they finally get it that they should sleep. So she goes on to say that it's basically like the baby shuts down and it presents itself in the appearance of sleep, but the baby it's a response of them conserving their energy. The baby is responding, it says here, the baby is responding to the possibility that it has been abandoned and is attempting to conserve energy to stay alive. How sad is that? That your baby is thinking that they have been abandoned by the person that they most love in the world. It's just sad that people would resort to these methods. I think it's cruel. I think it's modern day torture. I think it's a form of torture. Some of you may say that I'm an extremist. Some of you may say that I'm radical, but someone needs to say these things. I think we are in a time in our society where rates for depression, for suicide, for anxiety, for addiction are skyrocketing. It's time to take a look at the way that we are contributing to these things. And it all starts with a baby. How do we treat the most vulnerable in society? Babies are the most vulnerable beings in society. How do we treat them? How do we treat them? I'm going to tell you something. Spoil your babies. Love them. Hug them. Kiss them. Enjoy them. You're not going to spoil them. You're not going to ruin them. They're not going to be clingy and needy. It's going to be the opposite. It's going to be the opposite. They're going to be confident. They're going to be great. Babies grow up so quick. Before you know it, they are out and about. This is just a season. Our society needs more love, more compassion, not less of it. I don't know who needed to hear this message tonight, but I felt that I needed to make this video, and I needed to make it tonight. So if you're listening to this video, it's because it was for you. Maybe it's a harsh wake-up call. Maybe it's a call. Maybe it's a call for you to be more compassionate and caring for that baby that you have. Maybe it's time to understand what your role is as a mother or as a father. And what is your role? What is the most important thing for you to do if you decided to have this baby? Is to bring them up in love and in care. How do you do that? You just have them right next to you. You have these babies right next to you. That's what I did with all my babies. And they did just fine. They did just fine. You just bring them to your bed. Have a little bed right next to you. Even the crib if you want to. I'm not a fan of cribs. I'm not. But they will do just fine. And you will see that it will be the best thing. Because I don't even know how people can do this whole cry out method thing. And having to go into a room of a crying baby and having to hear a baby for hours cry and cry, you're not only like hurting yourself on a really deep level, you're hurting that child. And I know that there's no way to measure how this hurts people when they're adults. There's no way to measure these things, right? But I wonder, how this really damages people in the long run. I know it does. I know it does in one way, shape, or form. So I wanted to make this video because all of this comes from my experience as a mom of 5. So these are the things that I have learned along the way. That you sleep close to your baby at night, either in your bed, you co-sleep with them, you feed them, you tend to their very need. And as they get older, they're going to be confident human beings. They're going to be great. And how long do you let them sleep in your room? A lot of you may ask. Well, that's up to you and your family's needs. There are some kids that they could be ready to go to their own room when they're 2. There are some kids that if they're the only child in the home, they may need to stay there a little longer. But that's something for you to decide with your family. Just know that it's okay to have a child in your room with you. It's okay. They're going to be fine and you're doing the right thing. I'm going to list below information about the studies that I mentioned. Any more information about the cry-out method and co-sleeping. I'll link anything below in the description box. I hope you have enjoyed the video. I hope it has been of use to you. I just felt that this needed to be said. And I needed to be the one to say it tonight. All right, you guys. Until the next video. Bye-bye.